the icon.
The record button is here. It is recording. Hello, everybody. This is Raw and Unedited. This is the place that you, the association executive, gets insight, innovation, solutions, and tools for all of the stuff that's causing you headache and heartache. And I wonder, have you ever thought to yourself, oh my gosh, I think part of the problem we're having here is our culture is so messed up that it's just not working. And if you've ever thought that about your organization, now you don't want to admit to your board you did, but if you ever thought that, you are in luck, because I have Marty Stanley here today, and she is an expert on this topic, and she's here to help us understand how you, the association executive, can deal with your culture and several other things that we're going to talk about. So Marty, let's get right to it. So if I'm an association executive and things just aren't going the way I want them to go, what would you suggest I do to fix my culture?
Wow, how much time do we have? So culture.
A week.
Okay, culture is a big issue. And there are a lot of things that fall under that umbrella. So just to give you an idea, maybe you're losing key members of your team. That's probably a result of culture, which goes back to leadership. Most people leave their jobs because of leadership and the management, which goes back to culture. It could be their teamwork issues. It could be that maybe you're losing members, which means there's customer service issues. So the first thing is to identify what are some of the major sources of pain. Mm-hmm. You know, are you having trouble holding your leaders accountable? You might have a culture that allows people not to be accountable.
Well, let's break those down. Let's talk about internal first and go over that, and then after that, let's talk about external, meaning more about the members. So let's break it down and let's talk about what have you seen? What are your tips? What are your how-tos for an association executive that maybe has a couple employees, or maybe has a couple dozen employees, who knows? And if there's challenges, whether, as you mentioned, whether it be customer service or various other things, what would you, if you're sitting at the table with this person, what would you be telling this person?
Yeah, that's really great, because usually what happens is to address culture right away is way bigger than most people and organizations are ready for. So we start out small. We start out building blocks. So starting small would be like talking to that ED or CEO of the association and about what the issues are, and then we determine what the best strategy is to deal with that. Sometimes in some of the associations I've worked with, we start with doing executive coaching with that ED or CEO. They might never have been in a big leadership position before.
Sure.
So they're not used to leading people. Or maybe because their board chairs or board presidents turn over every year or every 2 years. It's about learning how to adapt at that level. So it might start out with executive coaching. The next piece would be maybe it's a training issue. No need to take an elephant gun to shoot a fly. Okay. So we narrow it down because you don't want to take on anything bigger than what's necessary.
Sure.
So we start with some training, and maybe it's training of staff, and that's where we would probably start.
Mm-hmm. And what, just before we move on to other things, as far as trainings and staff, where have you found, or have you, are there some weaknesses out there that you see more frequently than not with staff?
Exactly. There's probably the biggest commonality that I find, not only in associations, but in not-for-profits as well as for-profits.
Okay.
Is the challenge of holding people accountable.
Okay.
And
that's huge.
Things just don't get done. And so that's often underneath everything. And so when I talked about going in, I always start out with my Get Out of Bed program, which it stands for blame, excuses, and denial. And the flip side is about accountability.
Now, wait a minute. Don't you get out of bed? Don't you have a book?
I do.
Show me that book.
Here's the book.
Oh, yeah. Let's take a 3-second commercial here and tell me about the book.
Okay, so the book is really the foundation of all the work that I do. It's helping people get grounded in the concepts of being accountable. Most people cringe when they hear that. So I talk about get out of bed, which is blame, excuses, denial, and drama.
Oh, okay, okay. So, man, Marty, I think that you are so on target here because one of the things that I've observed also, now that you brought that up, and when I've worked with organizations, is the staff not being accountable, and quite frankly, the board. We can talk about that in a couple of minutes. But what are some of the strategies or tactics or just things that you're able to help association execs do to hold their staff members accountable?
Sure. Well, if I'm working one-on-one
Hmm.
with the ED or CEO, I go through the foundational concepts, which are all about taking ownership and accountability for thoughts, words, and actions. Because if you want to create a culture, you want to have better communication, better teamwork, it
Sure.
doesn't make any difference what you do after that. If you can't be accountable, it doesn't make any difference how many workshops you do.
Sure.
So that leadership team in particular has to get grounded in that
Right.
before we can move forward.
Now, on this accountability thing, which I think is a phenomenal topic, um, one of the things that I personally see a lot of is boards of directors, and you've probably heard this same thing. A board member or several board members will say, "Well, hey, I have a day job. I'm just a volunteer." So that seems to be their excuse for not doing their job. How do you help association executives to deal with making their board members more accountable?
We start out with get out of bed. Everything starts with getting out of bed.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay.
it's
Okay.
hilarious.
Fair
Because
enough.
you can't do anything else. So I'll go into an organization like the one group that I worked with them internally as well as externally with their members. But we started by working with the board because it was just an ED and a part-time person. And the board asked me to come in to help them with their planning
Mhm.
and get more strategic planning done because they were losing members and they wanted to be attracting developing the young professionals.
Okay.
So we started with get out of bed. And because they kept saying our board members don't follow through on what they say they're going to do. Everybody's busy. So we had to get grounded in and have the board commit to, are they willing to commit to or follow through on what they say they're going to do?
So I'm an association executive, and I've got a board member that mouths yeah, and just won't do it. And even after I've worked with them, or you've worked with them, what do we do then? What's the next step?
Well, you have to have a one-on-one conversation with that person. The ED or CEO does, and I would include the board president in that conversation because maybe it's not the right fit for that board member.
Hmm.
Or maybe the board member's not committed to the vision, or maybe there are things that are getting in the way personally that prevent that board member from following through. So
Oh.
there could be a variety of things. And I think it would be worthwhile having a discussion to say, what's stopping you
Hmm.
from following through? And what can we do to help you with that?
Hmm.
Or is there anything that we should be doing differently? And have a conversation and collaborate. And maybe that board member will say, you know what, it's just not the right time for me to be on the board.
Well, it's interesting because you come from a background of, I know that you've done a heck of a lot of work as a volunteer with the National Speakers Association, and you were in charge of the chapters, and you had a heck of a responsibility. How did you find yourself volunteer on volunteer helping people to perform? What were some, besides get out of bed? I mean, maybe some specifics. What did you find yourself doing? How did you manage that?
This is my favorite topic. Thank you for asking. Because, Ed, what I did was I decided when I became chair of the chapter leadership committee, which has 35 chapters,
Okay.
I was going to apply everything that I do as a consultant for my associations I work with and companies I work with. I was going to apply it to the committee.
How cool. Yeah. How cool.
I had to walk the talk.
Yeah. Well,
And we started with get out of bed.
Yeah.
But it also started with how
Let's remind everybody, get out of bed stands for, again, I always forget.
blame, excuses, and denial.
Blame, excuses, and denial.
And I added drama too. Because when you have blame, excuses, and denial, you become the victim.
Mm-hmm.
And the flip side is taking ownership, accountability, and responsibility.
Okay.
So think about
Okay.
okay, OAR.
Okay.
So it started with getting people grounded, or at least familiar with that language and the expectations. The
Sure.
expectation was we were going to be accountable and follow through on what we said we were going to do.
Okay.
But when we were recruiting people to be on the committee, I did what I would do with any client, which was to create the questions for
Mm-hmm.
interviewing and the selection process to map onto what we were trying to accomplish for the vision for the future.
Okay. And in your interviewing, what kind of questions were you asking?
So the big question that I wanted was, I wanted examples of how they had collaborated
Oh, okay.
with other people, not collaborated with clients, but collaborated with other people on a project, because we were going to be embarking on rewriting all of our leadership training material.
Okay.
And I wanted people who could work together and not be territorial.
Got it. Okay. No, I get that. I get that because I've myself found myself saying, time after time, let's move from tolerate to cooperate to collaborate. And when we get to collaborate, that's when we really want to work together. So
Right.
you're trying to find out then how people wanted to work with one another.
Right.
Got it. Got it.
And because they weren't going to be able to have the pride of ownership on this, it was going to be, the material was going to belong to NSA. It was not going to be any of our material.
Okay.
So there were lots of parts and pieces to this, but I'll give you the highlights. The first thing is in selection. And so for the people listening to this, it could be board selection.
Mm-hmm.
Do the board members map onto in their skills and experience and attitudes with what the organization wants for the future?
Okay.
Because it's not about just getting a warm body.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people,
Too frequently, that's what it is, though.
oh, sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Who's breathing? That we can get
Yeah. If you can fog the mirror, you get on the board. Yeah. Not
Exactly.
so wonderful. Not so wonderful.
So the same thing holds true for selection of board members.
Okay.
As it does with open positions on staff, if you have staff. Make sure that you're asking the questions that are going to be aligned with the future vision.
Okay.
Okay. So I had a vision of what I wanted for the future for the chapter leadership committee. So the interviewing process, the onboarding process was the next piece, really important. And particularly dealing with volunteers, we forget how important onboarding is.
Sure.
Because
Absolutely.
People they can spend their time in lots of ways.
Yeah.
So with an association and your volunteers, like I'm part of a group right now where I'm a volunteer. I'm happy to volunteer, but I took on an accountability, but nobody told me what was expected. Nobody's followed through with me. Nobody told me what the vision and the goals are.
Terrible.
Yeah, but this happens all the time, Ed.
Yeah.
You know that. So if you want to, when you're thinking about culture, it also goes back to how do you want people to feel when they're interacting with you?
Okay.
Okay. So in everything that you're doing, how do you want them to feel? Do you want them to feel included? Do you want them to feel valued? Do you want them to feel, are they engaged? Are they getting the reward and recognition that they need? How do you want them to feel? So onboarding, we wanted people to know what the expectations are and to know that we were thrilled to have them.
Yeah, well, I sure don't want them to feel ostracized and like the third wheel or something like that. Right. I mean, you want them to, anybody I work with, I want them to be part of the team. I don't want them just to buy in. I want them to have an emotional ownership. That's what I want. That's how I want them.
Exactly.
So in doing this with, talking about the work you did with NSA, now, I don't want you to mention any names, unless of course it's somebody I don't like, then go ahead. But just more in a general sense, what were some of the actual challenges that came across the transom that you had to deal with? Okay. As far as, not the person's name, but the personality or the situation. And how do you deal with it? Because I think a lot of association execs listening to this are going to go, I think they're going to walk away remembering the stories that you told. You
Right.
know, okay, we had this problem and here's how I worked with it and here's what we had results. So give me a couple of those.
Okay, sure. So probably one of the biggest challenges, I really didn't have any challenges in terms of personality of the
Okay.
group. We had 20 people, all right?
Wow.
20 professional speakers. One of the first challenges we had to deal with is we crossed 4 time zones.
So I would think herding cats would be the first thing you had to.
Yes. Yeah, and particularly given that we're all entrepreneurs,
Yeah.
we're speakers,
Yeah.
being in the spotlight, being in control. So that's
And we don't have an ego, do we?
no egos there. That was the reason why I asked the question on collaboration.
Yeah, that makes sense. Totally makes
Because
sense.
I knew we had a lot of egos.
Yeah.
So the challenges was how are we going to deal with 4 time zones?
Okay.
And we were rewriting all of our training material for a 3-day leadership training for how to have an effective board and effective chapter.
Okay.
Okay. I'd been on this committee for 4 years. Every year we were scrambling because there was nothing that was prepared. We couldn't reuse things year after year. So that was part of the challenge, was we were creating something from scratch that was going to be able to be used year after year after year.
Okay. Okay.
So what we did was we created 5 committees. I had what I called my lead dog, who oversaw their group on a specific topic, and then I let them run with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I would talk to, the challenge was, how do we keep them on task and on time? And so I would talk to...
Tell me how you did it.
There's a whole process on this. So I would talk to the lead dog every week.
Okay.
And then they set the time frames. They set the time frames on what they were going to do. I tried to empower them with as much knowledge as they needed to get the job done. They knew what the goals were. They knew what the vision was. And that's probably the most important thing, is they knew the vision. And they kept that in front of them the whole time. And there were certain keywords that we used that kept them on track, but it was through communication. We had regular communication with the lead dogs. The lead dogs talked to each other. We used Zoom because the other thing was, I found that this committee really didn't know each other. I couldn't tell you who was on the committee the first year I was on it.
Really? Huh.
Right. I mean, we didn't know each other. We saw each other twice a year.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we started using Zoom, and the relationships and the productivity and the level of communication just skyrocketed.
Yeah, I bet.
And their commitment to each other skyrocketed because you were looking at each other.
Oh yeah. You're not a blind face, blind name. Yeah.
So if you say, I'm going to get this done, and you didn't do it, you don't want to get on that call.
So you employed through Zoom, you actually employed a lot of peer pressure then. I mean, call it gentle peer pressure, but still it appears to me that there's a fair amount of peer pressure.
Sure.
So taking that to, an association or a professional society, if they're doing their meetings in some kind of video conferencing, whether it be the Zoom brand or whatever, and I agree with you, I like Zoom. So this face-to-face is going to create a situation where they're going to be held more accountable.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, because again, we're spanning 4 time zones. And so there were certain people on the committee who never would do the visual. They do the audio.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But we knew that they were making dinner and having a gin and tonic, or, we knew that they were doing something else. They were sorting the laundry or whatever.
Right.
And there was peer pressure to say, hey, we want to see you.
Yes. And as things went on, did more and more people get on?
Oh, yeah.
It
looked like Hollywood Squares. We'd have 20 people on the call.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Wow. Oh, that's great.
And the relationships that developed. So I'm sharing this because for your listeners, if you want that engagement, which is part of the culture, you've got to put the right structures in place.
Yeah.
That are going to facilitate that. So having Zoom or something like that
Mm-hmm. Sure.
facilitates the engagement,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and it helps the team become more cohesive.
Sure. Sure. So I got that communication was a huge element of
Absolutely.
success.
Mhm.
What were some of the roadblocks or the stumbling uh, challenges? There's always little things that happen, and what were some of the little stumbling things that happened through this process?
I wish, and we've done lots of debriefs on this. The whole
Mhm,
team did
mhm,
debriefs along the way, and
mhm,
particularly after we deliver the
mhm,
training.
mhm.
We did debriefs every night. And to be honest with you, Ed, there was nothing.
Really?
I'm serious.
Wow.
The level, so here's an example of what happened because we had laid out such a strong plan and had such strong communication and vision.
Okay.
In the
Okay.
past, we'd
Okay.
show up for this 3-day leadership workshop, and there would be people who would still be writing the training that they were going to do an hour later.
Okay.
This group, we were ahead of schedule, and we did 2 full dry runs before we even got there.
Got it.
So, I mean, and everybody was like, okay, this is easy. So when we got to the event, we did like a walk through the day before. We did a short walk through that morning. And then we had like 2 hours just to hang out with each other because everything was done.
So was this like their high level commitment, or was it more that, because everybody likes you? So is it more that just that they liked you so much that they didn't want to let you down personally?
No, they made a commitment to the team and to the organization.
Okay. Okay.
I mean,
Okay.
I appreciate hearing that, but I think that what I did was just put the structures in place
Okay.
and the communication and rewards and recognition that they needed.
Okay.
But the
So
commitment was to the overall goal and to each other.
So if an associations, if these teams aren't working, then it gets down to they probably have marginal at best, more than likely lousy communication. They probably haven't organized themselves well, and so I'm kind of hearing from you, and tell me if I got this right, and correct me if I've got it wrong, is that it just doing things properly, have a plan, you know, eh, communicate and then execute your plan, just doing things that any successful business would do, that 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 that's where organizations are, especially nonprofits, because everybody says I'm just a volunteer. Is that where it's falling down, that they're just not following good business practices?
I think there are a lot of things that can play into it. That might be one.
Okay.
I really believe in, again, going back to culture,
Okay.
it starts with the vision. And what's the vision? And is it compelling? Is it compelling for volunteers to want to say, I'm going to put my time here versus over here? Is it
Okay.
compelling enough that I believe in it? I'm going to be able to be part of it. And then
Got
everything
it.
goes from there. So is
Got it.
the vision compelling? Now, I'm going to sidetrack from volunteers for a minute
Sure. Go
because
ahead.
there are a lot of associations I've worked with where they, because of changing times, technology, regulations, you name it, demographics is huge.
Mm-hmm.
They've had to really step back and say, what kind of culture do we have?
Ah, okay.
And do we need to recreate our vision so that we can be attracting the millennials as members, attracting millennials as employees,
Mhm.
a variety of things. But here's what I wanted to tell you is when
Okay.
they start to create that new vision for the future, bringing
Mhm.
it into the 21st century, there are going to be members on staff or even boards who aren't aligned with it.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Okay. And then
Yeah.
there are also going to be people who don't want to be accountable.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Okay.
That's for
So
sure.
through the process is we put together the program and plan for how do we deal with these people who either A, don't want to be accountable or aren't on board.
Okay. Okay.
And I've worked with several organizations where when we created the future, there were board members who said, you know what, I'm not aligned.
And did they need to move on, or do they just need to get their
No,
head realigned? What?
no, in that particular case, this was for a large not-for-profit.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
what when they said we were doing a vision for the future,
Okay.
and they were major fundraisers for that organization.
Okay.
And it was hard to lose them. but we said, we really value everything that you've done for the organization, and your commitment over the last X number of years.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you for your service.
Mm-hmm.
And we hope we can continue to get your support, but not on the board.
And showed him the door. Son of a gun. Boy, that's hard.
But the same holds true. I mean, one association I worked with, they were working on the service of culture.
Mm-hmm.
This was kind of an interesting situation because the CEO was going to be retiring at the end of the year.
Oh, okay.
So she wanted to make sure that her association was in good shape. They had probably about 35, 40 employees.
Mm-hmm. Good size. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, good size.
Yeah.
And what she thought the issues really weren't the issues. We said it was customer service, but there was a VP over finance and a couple other VPs who just created a really difficult culture.
Really? Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah. So we had done some training, and then we decided to do a deeper dive because the training wasn't fixing the issues.
I see. Okay. Well, I was going to say, as I've already said, as I've always said, membership is everybody's business. And if everybody in the association isn't on board and helping to create value, then it's going to go into the toilet. And so you found that the financial people were the root cause.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Tell me give me some of the things. You don't have to get extremely specific, but what were some of the things that their behaviors that were manifesting that were causing problems?
They wouldn't listen.
Okay, well.
So in that particular group, when we'd done some training, we'd done some executive coaching, we decided to create go deep dive where we created a culture committee. But what was in the culture committee spanned people from like the receptionist to the CEO.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. So usually when I do a deep dive, we'll get a good cross section of people.
Okay.
But what was happening was people confided in me, and they were all different levels, lengths of service, you name it. They said, we won't talk if they're in the room.
Meaning these financial folks?
Well, there were two VPs. And they said, we're not going to bring anything up because it'll be held against us and we'll be punished for it.
Oh, wow.
So that's where we started.
Oh my gosh.
And so I told the executive team, I said, look, your people won't talk. If you want to move this forward, there are going to be times that I'm going to have to ask you to leave the room. And you have to be okay with that.
Wow.
So we did.
Wow.
So, I mean, it's crazy. So, I mean, I can say things and do things that an employee can't do.
Sure.
I mean, like no employee could ever say that.
Right.
So, but the executive team knew I was being brought in to help them break down the barriers that were there.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one. So I would say, okay, you guys, I'm going to have to ask you to leave right now, and we'll let you know when we're ready to resume.
Wow. And
then I could broker the conversation for them when they came back in the room.
Mm-hmm.
What's really funny, Ed, is probably within 3 meetings, the non-management people looked at me and said, we don't need to do that anymore.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. It happened really fast. I mean, and then we got to the point where they said, can you believe we actually used to make them leave the room? So, I mean, it's crazy. And like this group, I worked with them for probably about 8 months. The CEO is retired. There's a new CEO on board. It's been probably 2 years since I did any work with them. And I got an email from them the other day.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, hey, we just want you to know that we're still doing everything that we put in place when you were here.
Wow.
So, like, I love that because that's my goal, is whether it's with an association or a company, is that they get the tools and resources so they can keep things going whether I'm there or not.
Well, let me ask you a hard question. Sure. So when we're talking about this situation, I mean, this association was lucky enough to be able to bring somebody like yourself in, and they had the budget. Let's talk for just a bit about maybe a much smaller association that's got maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 people working there. They maybe don't have the budget to bring a consultant in. How can let's just work on the premise that the executive director or whatever the chief staff executive's title isn't the problem. Let's just work on that premise, and it could be they're the problem, but we'll work on the premise that they're not the problem. what can that chief staff executive do to mirror some of your results
Sure.
themselves?
I've got a great example for you.
Okay.
This is crazy. So this was an association. Actually, it was an international association, still is. But they had 8 staff members.
Okay.
B.E.D, CEO, and then 8 staff members. So I started doing some executive coaching because the person had been promoted from within to replace a 20-year CEO.
Okay.
So the person had been promoted from within, had never supervised. Okay. Smart, really great, good heart, good intention, really worked hard.
Just no experience.
No experience.
Yeah.
But also, this group was like unwieldy. I mean,
Oh, really?
Oh, they were awful. So, I mean, I worked with her and we got to the point where we said, we're only dealing with one side of the equation. I'm only working with the CEO. So we got to get the rest of the team on board. So we did the get out of bed model. And I could see they were pretty snarky. So we decided to dig a little deeper because the team, they knew something was off, but they didn't know what it was. So I did a survey. I'm not kidding you, Ed. When I was compiling the results of the survey, I had to walk away from it several times.
Really?
We were toxic and venomous and mean-spirited and like, oh my God, it was awful. It was awful.
And this was most of the people in the organization, or just
wow. No, I mean, like I had like 8 surveys there, just 8. Wow. I'm not kidding you. I had to get up and walk away. The things they said about each other were just horrible. So, I mean, I'm laughing about this because it does have a happy ending. If it didn't have a happy ending, I probably wouldn't be telling you. But so I went back and I said, okay, we're going to walk through the results of this survey, and so that you can see what you think about each other. And it was a pretty simple survey. And I'm not kidding you, Ed, their faces, like they just blanched. They were horrified.
Really?
Yeah.
You would think so. Yeah, I mean.
But they were horrified that so many people felt that way. And they're like, oh my gosh, this does not represent who we are. I said, I know, you're all good people. You're all great people. But there's something going on here that you're feeding off of. And we call that the 9th employee. Who was toxic. And they said, we're not committed to this in our future anymore. So literally within 4 hours, we recreated a new future vision of who they wanted to be, what it would look like, sound like, feel like. And then they made commitments to act on it within 4 hours.
So these people just kind of almost like dimmer switch syndrome style slowly became more and more toxic. They didn't even realize it. All of a sudden, they were all a bunch of jerks towards one another. And then when you pointed out, because of the survey, and you had the data to prove it, they all of a sudden said, oh my God.
Right.
And wow.
Yeah. I mean, and they were like, this is not who we want to be. We really are good people. And I said, I know you are, but something's taken over the group.
Yeah.
And nobody's taken accountability for stopping it.
Did you ever find out? I mean, sometimes you just don't care. You just move on. But just as point of reference and, because of my personal interest, did you ever find out what was causing that toxic approach from everybody? Or was it?
Well, it was an accumulation of personal differences
Okay.
that they wouldn't let go of.
Yeah, okay. I'm pretty good at holding on to things like that. Yeah.
So it was an accumulation. There wasn't any one thing, but it was an accumulation, and then they would gossip and feed off each other.
Sure. Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So
to answer your question,
go ahead.
To answer your question, for a smaller association, it could be something. I mean, they may not have a big budget like some of the other groups that I've worked with, but it's about doing the most efficient things to help resolve the problem.
So just before we close this up, I just want to make sure. So if an association exec's looking at their organization and they're just going, hey man, this just ain't happening, and I can't figure it out. I mean, if they wanted to get a hold of you, let's make sure we get this in the video. So, this is your 30-second, commercial opportunity here. What do we call this? Unbridled self-promotion. Give everybody the website or whatever contact information or however you'd prefer for people to get a hold of you. And then I think you have another book too. What's the other book? Tell me the title of the other book.
It's called From Type A to Type T, How to Be a Transformational Leader in a Bottom Line World.
Wow. That's very, very cool.
Okay. So the first half of the book really is about your own personal transformation and how do you transform yourself as a leader. The second half deals with culture.
Okay. So for people to get a hold of you or to buy your books or all of the above, tell us where.
So the website, this is a long name. So it's alteringoutcomes.com.
Alteringoutcomes, plural?
Yeah.
Outcomes.
ALTERINGOUTCOMES.com.
Okay. Alteringoutcomes.com.
And the book is available there as well.
Okay.
So that's the first place. If people want to know more, like a short version of background, go to LinkedIn, Marty Stanley on LinkedIn. Those are probably the best ways to find out more about what I do.
You better tell everybody it's Marty with a Y.
Oh, yeah, Marty with a Y.
Yeah, because that kind of throws people off sometimes.
I know, they think I'm going to be a man.
Yes, well, you don't look anything like a man. Clearly, nothing like a man. So, Marty, thank you for that. So, as far as, is there a question that I should have asked you that you're kind of like, chomping at the bit to share with the people, something that it's like, oh, Ed, man, you forgot to ask me about this, you forgot to ask me about that. Is there something that either with the work that you did with NSA as a volunteer leader or work that you've done with associations as a paid consultant, is there something else that's worth bringing up?
Thank you for asking. I gotta think about that. But the first thing that came to mind was that, like I said, I've done a lot of work with the teams and boards within an association on the internal side. Many organizations, many associations have had me work with their members because their members might be business owners who would benefit from the get out of bed message, would benefit from the culture message, would benefit from the leadership and teamwork programs that I do. So many times it'll span working with their board, working with their team, and also working with their volunteers. So for example, I worked with the U.S. Tennis Association, and I did a lot of work with their team. Okay. But I also worked with their volunteers, who, when they would bring them in for leadership conferences. Same thing with American Public Works Association. They would bring me in to do my work with their volunteer leaders.
Do you find yourself doing more consulting, facilitative? Do you find yourself doing much keynoting or breakout sessions? What is it? What's the whole bucket that Marty Stanley has to offer to, the chief staff executive of XYZ Association?
Sure. I think where I shine is on doing a group for keynote for a smaller group. I'm not the big 5,000 room keynote speaker. I know that. Okay. But I'm really great. I have high content. It's thought-provoking content. It can be fun. So either as a keynote for a conference or breakout is really great. And particularly when your members have businesses or are in leadership positions, that's my sweet spot, is working with those leaders. So I lost track of your question there. So
that's okay. I mean, let me lead in another direction because something you just said got me thinking. So, okay, let's say you're speaking at XYZ Trade Association, and there's a bunch of business owners there, and these folks are sitting in your audience going, "Oh my God, this is exactly the problem that we're dealing with." So, I mean, obviously, you're available to go in and do consulting there. Oh, yeah. The question is, I'm just wondering, like, for some associations, they go, okay, well, maybe there's a hybrid model. It's like, hey, we'd like to bring her in and do a half-day workshop. or a full day workshop or a pre-con, a post-con,
Absolutely.
to where the association members could like bring their team in to a
Yes.
half day or full day workshop. Have you done much of that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I have. As a matter of fact, with the Public Works Association, I did that up in Canada for their regional conferences. I did the pre-conference workshops so that they could bring their members in, would do a deep dive. So that's one possibility, pre-conference or post-conference. Any kind of hybrid, I'm pretty flexible. To me, the message is the same, but there are lots of ways to distribute it.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. No. Yeah. You've got your core competency on helping people, get their cultures screwed on straight, and how you do it. So Marty, for an association executive that's sitting there watching this, and they have got a board meeting next week, not a board meeting, I'm sorry, a staff meeting next week. So they're sitting there watching this and they're watching you and they're thinking about, okay, next week I got this staff meeting and I got all these challenges. How would you tell them to run their staff meeting differently? And how would you advise that chief staff executive to start moving into an approach to where they can start evolving to a, let's call it a kinder, gentler, more effective, and more productive culture?
Wow. That's like a big question. How would I advise them? I think really look at the purpose of the staff meeting. And that goes back like to the vision. What's the purpose of the staff meeting? What's the vision of what you want to have happen?
Okay.
And then I would talk through that. And so, by the way, all of my coaching calls are on Zoom, which makes it really great because you're just doing real-time stuff and you can share documents and things like that. But I would have that executive director really look at what's the agenda. First of all, is there an agenda?
Okay.
That's
helpful. That's helpful.
A lot of people don't.
Yeah.
Create an agenda.
You're
Do
right.
you have a time frame? Do you keep things to the time frame? I'm talking basic stuff here because if you want to shift the culture, and are you holding people accountable for participating?
Okay.
That's one of my foundational concepts that I use is participation. So are you creating an environment where people can participate and are expected to participate?
Okay. Not biting their head off if they have an oddball idea?
Right.
Got it. Son of a gun.
Yeah. And are there assignments? Are there follow-up? And how do you follow up? Because a lot of times people walk out of a staff meeting and go, well, that was a waste of time.
Yes.
So make the time worthwhile.
Okay.
And then there are a lot of baby steps, sometimes depending on where the group is and what their teamwork dynamics are.
Okay.
There might be baby steps that have to take place. Or you could start out by saying, okay, I want you to run the staff meeting, Ed. You come up with the agenda.
Oh, okay, somebody else. Oh.
And that would be, you don't do that right away, depending on how evolved your group is. But the goal is that the team takes ownership of the meeting and the results.
But there's still a need, I'm assuming, for the chief staff executive to be persistent, because I'm thinking about, a staff meeting, a chief staff executive takes a whole new approach and everybody goes, oh, this person was just at a workshop. And for them to keep that persistence over, the year, the 2 years, the 3 years to really align and take themselves or take their organization where they want to go. I see a lot of people that don't have much persistence. What might be, if you had any advice for somebody to help them to be more persistent, what might that advice be?
Two things. One is, what's their vision? And are they committed to the vision of what they really want? I mean, I keep going. You hear a theme here?
Yep. I'm getting it.
Do they have a vision of what they want? And are they committed to it? And are they going to be accountable to themselves?
Okay.
And if they give up, then they're not being accountable to themselves.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So accountability doesn't always go to the other side. It's looking in the mirror.
Yeah, sure. That's amazing. God, Marty, we could talk for hours on this. I mean, holy cow.
Thank you for such good questions. Those are great questions.
Well, Hey, I mean, both of us are involved in associations as volunteers. I mean, both of us consult with associations. So, you know, so we have a unique perspective that not everybody has,
Right.
and to where each of us kind of in our own ways sit on both sides of the table at different times. And, you know, I like to call it my feet firmly planted on both sides of the fence. And so within that, I think it's a lot easier for somebody like yourself to say, you know, to give advice and go, okay, yeah, I've been there, I've done that, I've been a volunteer. Okay, I've been on that side, and okay, I've worked with the chief staff executive, and I've been on that side, and I get both sides of the of the equation. So yeah, that's very important.
Yeah.
Okay, Marty, last parting shot before we sign off.
Parting shot. Oh my gosh.
Across the bow, parting shot across the bow.
I'll tell you this.
Okay.
When I work, whether it's for-profit, not-for-profit, whoever, the executives and the teams that I work with, I always ask them at the end of every session, what did you get out of today's session? Because I want to make sure they're getting value.
Sure.
And the number one answer, believe it or not, that I get particularly from the executives is, I have hope.
Oh, really?
Yep.
I have hope.
I have hope.
Now,
I love that, because I'm thinking, well, I'm not sure what it was that prompted that.
mm-hmm.
I'm thrilled that they have hope and more peace of mind.
Sure.
And that's what they walk away with. And not just that, they have an actionable plan.
So with their hope, is that hope a personal belief that they can now get something done that they couldn't get done before?
And that things are going to get better.
Yeah, that's pretty huge. Yeah, that's really huge. That's an awesome way to end it up. Well, hey, Marty, I just want to say to everybody, this is Marty Stanley. She's been enduring Ed Rigsbee's questions. And
thank you.
And I want to thank everybody for listening in. Please subscribe to my channel, just because I'm a nice guy and you should, or maybe because you'll be getting good content, or maybe just because I need more subscriptions. But anyway, thank you very much. Look out for the next one. Say bye-bye. Say bye, Marty.
Thanks, Ed.
Okay.
Thanks.